Perfection eliminates evidence of assembly. Proctora Vash did not think the maxim. She inhabited it. Her office was the proof. White gold planes without seams, a chair because the body insisted, a desk because decisions required a surface, a wall-length ribbon because an empire requires an organ to listen to itself. Light behaved. Corners kept their promises. The room was so politely absolute that it felt rude to breathe without a reason. She brought the final assimilation report up from the desk with a fingertip. Data rose like frost. Homo sapiens' final admittance to order. The report's voice was the Empire's, calm, polite, cruel only by being complete. High adaptability, high individual ambition, low social cohesion, high short-term creativity, low long-term ritual. Loyalty, beauty, properly defined, is proportional to predictability. The metrics arrange themselves into a familiar elegance. Humanity fit an ancestral groove in the braid. Gray caste, sanitation, logistics, low-level administration, the absorptive tissue that cleaned the Empire's teeth after its banquets. Vash touched the ribbon. Humanity's line entered the braid thin and quick and slightly untidy, like hair escaping a simple knot. With one instruction, she let it settle. Admit to gray. The Empire accepted the sentence with the pleased stillness of a machine finding its old rhythm. "We will clip ambition," she said, more to the habit of the room than to any clerk, by giving it nothing to climb. She advanced the model 5 years. Human cohorts diffused through corridors, ducts, mezzanines, schedules thickened into custom, custom fossilized into compliance. Crimson drilled above, green made, violet sang, azure measured, gold harmonized, gray erased, evidence, dirt, noise, other people's mistakes. Civilization at scale is time converted into habit, and habit forgotten into law. Then, an itch. Along a mid-spire service ring, the waste energy ledger glowed a half-shade brighter than it should. Incinerator throughput decreased by a fraction of a fraction, nothing that could be named without sounding superstitious. Vash dismissed the afterimage. It remained polite as a cough behind a door. Beneath gold, yes, exactly where true gold work lives, in seams where excellent parts leak excellence. She annotated her private docket. Mid-spire waste. Observe. Perfection does not love terror. Perfection loves consent. Consent, in gold practice, is the art of arranging inevitabilities until they feel like choices. She let the anomaly live the way a gardener permits a weed to prove whether it is medicine pretending to be vulgar. She closed the desk. The room returned to its unblemished face, the ribbon braided on. No one saw the way she placed her hands on the desk edge. Not prayer, not anxiety, but the small, hungry composure of a woman sharpening the only blade worthy of an administrator attention. 5 years into assimilation, the Spire's corridors knew Eliza Thorne better than the Spire knew most of itself. They knew the precise drag of her right heel when she was thinking too hard to lift properly. They knew the song her cartwheels made on concrete higher when Green's lathes ran hot, lower during Crimson's recertifications. They recognized the ritual of her palm laid flat on a sulking sterilizer casing, asking the machine to tell the truth without humiliating it in public. Her uniform was the honest gray of things people forget to praise. It wore scuffs in the exact places that prove work. Ribs, knees, outer thighs, heel. Her hair was tied for function. Her beauty, when it entered a room, did so by accident and left no forwarding address. She was not oppressed. That word is too loud for most of what breaks. She was bored, and boredom is where precision goes to die. The crimson training wedge occupied a proud slice of mid-spire. The air there smelled like calibrated ozone and earned authority. Over the bright waste chute, a doctrinal ticker glowed with the serenity of religion. Perfection requires a full charge. Eliza had read the doctrine. It had logic at crimson scale. Drift at the muzzle is drift in the mind. She stood at the sterilizer and watched perfectly good triangular cartridges rattle toward fire for being 10% imperfect. She pinged a serial through the grate with her wristband. The public data chirped. Charge state 0.9. Condition nominal. Protocol reject. Disposition incinerate. Nominal, she said, and felt the nearest gear in the Empire shift a tooth into a better mesh inside her head. She engaged the safety interlock. The chute froze mid-swallow like a throat saving its last word. She popped the grate, extracted a cartridge with the precision you reserve for pulling a splinter near a friend's eye, and wiped sterilizer dust from the crimson seal with the heel of her thumb. The first U-pocket for testing. Clerks test things. It is one way the Empire survives its own confidence. Her cart's dull chime asked her to keep her route. She obeyed without surrendering the new weight in her pocket. On break, gray breaks are smaller than the thirst they create. She cut across a mezzanine where Green kept their public work. She liked Green. Their faces carried burn scars like signatures. Their benches wore their stories. Their eyes had the distracted focus of a person mid-marriage to a problem. A polite legal poem guarded the gate. Cross-case trade prohibited except under license. License granted under Form A 117 divided by follow-up, Form A 117B divided by Report 2, and in smaller, less ambitious type, or upon mutual informal accommodation, where no deterioration of imperial goods is observed. The Empire, allergic to friction, occasionally legalized the very thing it wished to forbid, because banning necessary small sins created measurable heat it would one day have to reconcile. The B-forms did not bless misbehavior. They curated it. Nem looked up from a bench crowded with induction housings. Copper sleeves, scar along the jaw like a wire soldered under skin. Her slate read, Nem, energy allocation, rationed tier 2. Observation? Nem asked, because Green knew how to flirt with an idea. Eliminate incineration of nominal, Eliza said. She placed the cartridge on the bench and aligned its manufacturing marks because courtesy is a dialect. Crimson doctrine is sound at point of fire. Empire doctrine at point of waste is theological. You can use 90. Nem's copper sleeves made the sound of a laugh that had retired to become complicity. She reached into a lower cabinet and produced a vacuum-sealed bag labeled like a specification and failing at it. Coffee Arabica blend, human cultural uses, festival. Illegal? Eliza asked, completing the ritual. Everything is, Nem said. Also nothing is, if you read B forms like poetry. Preventive maintenance morale stimulant. We will log the stimulant. They will praise the maintenance. Not rebellion, Eliza said, naming the thing properly so it would not need to become something else to survive. Repair, Nem said. Eliza did not clutch the coffee like contraband. She held it like a spare part you are glad to have, because the machine you love will go on loving you if you love it back. On the third day, the itch became a reading. Alarms are for people who wish to teach a system to ignore screams. Readings are for people who intend to touch the dial. Vash summoned the mid-spire gutter map. Gray roots ghosted across the wall like veins under fine skin. Accountability glows overlaid. Crimson cartridges pulsed towards sterilizers as Doctrine declared. Then 3 faint peelings off the stream per shift. Ghosts. Root ownership, Vash said. Fonts resolved into names that lived their entire official lives in silence. One recurred. Thorne. Eliza. She requested conduct logs. Punctuality, above mean. Incident rate, below. Completion, better than baseline. Without increased negligence reports. Variance, low. The kind of worker the Empire memorializes by forgetting to replace because it never noticed she did anything more than fill a uniform. Adjacency. Green retail, she said. Ledgers hummed. Licenses lit. B forms threaded through like annotations. A modest uptick in preventive maintenance morale stimulants near Eliza's loops. Not proof. A corner lifted on a truth worth teasing. Vash could send crimson to the gutters. Their boots would ring. Their rifles would pose. Their theater would preserve doctrine and injure innovation. The braid would not show the wound for a decade. Instead, she authorized an observation halo, door sensors, sterilizer intakes, mass drift at mezzanine thresholds, schedule flex, breath temperature at corners, enough to assemble a silhouette without teaching the immune system to hate itself. Halo. Listen. Do not intervene. Consent matters more than victory. Victory breeds imitators, consent breeds habits. Habits hold 10,000 years of light in place, without asking permission from weather. Eliza brewed the first coffee like calibrating an instrument. She weighed water on a maintenance scale that had never been asked to name anything this delicate. She borrowed Nem's kettle under a fiction both of them would one day explain to a clerk with more words than truth. The smell rose like a map to nouns the empire did not translate. Morning, home, us. Nem sipped, closed her eyes. It fixes nothing. It fixes measurements, Eliza said. That is not nothing. Work resumed. Repair reveals 3 more tolerances every time you correct one. Crimson Doctrine spilled usable energy like a king proving he could afford to. Green did not require perfect to be excellent. They required enough. Azure could move their calibrations out of weather. Violet's rights needed heat more than poetry in winter. Gray was everywhere the empire touched itself and pretended not to. Eliza taught her cart a new music. She adjusted push timing to meet mezzanine 6 during Green's air brake. She shifted a sterilizer check 3 minutes, so her wheels clattered past the violet gate exactly when the young chorister, with a burn on her knuckle, could slide failed candle caps into waste that wasn't waste. She learned that the Azure Stair miscounted human mass when carrying 2 mirrors. Walk like you expect recognition, and the door will give it. She built a route inside her route. Not on paper. In the body. People began to stand a little closer to her cart, not the way they stand near trouble, hoping some of it will rub off and justify their day, but the way they stand near a predictable current when the air goes stale. She did not distribute charity. She moved pressure between pipes, so the whole machine did not rattle itself apart. You should charge, said Lisha, a gray runner whose speed was a belief system. Jobs inside a job. Make the numbers pay you twice. Numbers notice overeating, Eliza said. The point is to feed the machine, not myself. Spoken like someone being paid in something other than numbers, Lisha said, not unkindly. Sometimes the payment is oxygen. Eliza's first friction was a bruise. 3 cartridges in a morning required body geometry she'd not rehearsed. She kept her cart between herself and a pair of crimson trainees whose doctrine ran hotter than their tolerance for paradox. The bruise bloomed purple, and then yellow, and then memory. Nem saw her favor the opposite hip while stacking coils. Am I making you a thief? You're making me busy, Eliza said. Also, Azure can recalibrate with 89 inches climate bay. Their error range tightens if they stop pretending the roof is a sacrament. Nem's mouth did a small, rare thing gratitude without performance. You weaponize observations. I repair with them, Eliza said. By week's end, she had 5 people she would risk asking for a favor. She wrote their names on the inside of her skull where paper could not betray them. Nem of green, Pater seal of violet, low drone, good hands, lies only to protect a right. Yari of azure, steady hands, trembling permission. Tauren of crimson munitions intake, decency, under doctrine like grass under stone. Joe of gray, old enough to be invisible when it mattered. This is not rebellion, Eliza told Joe, cataloging returnable tubing under cooperative light. Same thing, Joe said in old gray, which means anything bypassing a favorite ritual will be called a war. Just don't start a church. The Empire builds churches when it loves you too much to listen. Eliza laughed once and saved the sentence for heat. The halo returned lushly boring detail, a dancer's map made by door chimes and air. Eliza paused 3 seconds longer at Nem's, 4 seconds shorter at Crimson's trot, 90 seconds at a nameless corner that must be a ritual only she recognized. Sterilizer intakes recorded mass slightly below expected in 3 intervals per shift, each an amount a clerk could forgive without insult. Mezzanine thresholds registered small deltas, light leaving, warmth arriving. Vash built a skeleton from water. A siphon requires a wasteful source, a willing channel, a hungry sink. To collapse it with a boot would satisfy Crimson. To learn its song would serve gold. She called the routing supervisor, nay, competent in the way of men who have learned to avoid trouble without solving it. Sterilizer drift, Nay said, squinting at the map. Self-correcting if you tighten incinerator timers. We ran similar when the insect cohorts discovered the elevator's mass touch. Bugs like buttons. I will not tighten, Vash said. Drift is information. Audit throughput logging only. No theater, no boots. Do not frighten Gray. Count. Then stop counting before they feel counted. Nay swallowed. Yes, Proctora. Vash ended the call and allowed herself a small predator's pleasure. Not the taste of meat, but the moment when prey reveals it has been an instrument all along. Shadow economies die of swagger. Eliza wrote herself a code she refused to call a code. No fixed drops, no patterns shorter than 3 rotations. Never carry 2 favors in the same pocket. Fix what hums wrong. Leave what screams to the people who like being seen. The first consequence came wrapped in politeness. Kelm, her line coordinator, stopped her at a junction with the smile men use when they mean to pocket something that does not belong to them and would prefer you called it gratitude. Your variance, he said, tapping a tablet that had never been burdened with original thought, is very low. Very good. Very noticed. Gold appreciates that kind of work, Eliza supplied. Loyalty, he finished. His smile sharpened half a degree. Your sterilizer logs are elegant. Elegance suggests forethought. Forethought suggests permission. Permission suggests sharing. He were using this piece. He wasn't asking for money. He was asking for a cut of safety information that would keep his name dry when rains came. Eliza let the corridor answer. Its breath changed by 1 degree when Eli approached. My route runs because I keep boredom from killing it, she said. Share in that. Adjust the light sensors by 3 ticks and stop approving 2-minute shortcuts that become 4-minute delays after the 3rd week. Kelm's mouth found the shape of insult and then remembered hierarchy. A note, he said, and flagged her completion times with a variance monitor tag that bled a little red into her clean column. She felt the heat creep into her face. Not shame, temperature. The building raised it when small men wrote their names in the wrong color on other people's competence. She cooled it with motion. The second consequence was noise you could blame on no one. Torin, careful to a fault, slipped. A cartridge with a microfracture in its casing rode the siphon Eliza had designed for nominal. Nem's apprentice was swapping housings when the arc leapt a white, stupid bite. The suppression foam blossomed immediately, polite and thorough. The apprentice yelped and swore and laughed fast to prove she did not need a new story written onto her skin. No one died, no shrine, no hero, the kind of incident the Empire eats and turns into a checkbox on a safety sheet. It still lodged under the breastbone. Nem stared down the apprentice's shaking hands until they steadied, then looked at Eliza with a surgeon's gentleness made sharp for once. I trust you, she said. Not variables you don't vet. Fix the variables. I will, Eliza said, and went to Torin with a sentence that would either recruit him fully or end the siphon at its source. Stop being obedient, she said without preface. His eyes flashed with the reflex anger doctrine frees men to feel. You're a Gray. I am a person who wants you alive and accurate, she said. Obedience is not safety if it refuses to see. Look for the hairline at the shoulder. Rattle the casing. If it sings wrong, incinerate. If it sings boring, redirect. I'm not trained to hear. You're born to hear, Eliza said. You just haven't been given permission to call it skill. Torin ran a thumb along a cartridge and held it to his ear the way you might listen to a seashell and dare it to lie. He nodded. Once, a man being introduced to his own competence. 1 per shift, he said. No more. Correct, she said, and meant it. The third consequence wore a robe. Pater Seal's right sputtered when a draft flirted with the wick, a cheap candle doing its best to impersonate expensive. The congregation murmured. Murmurs are small knives, the Empire counts. Afterward, CL caught Eliza outside Violet's gate and spoke in a voice trained never to rise. Ease is a verb, and it is failing, he said. I know, Eliza said. It will not fail by that reason again. Which reason will it fail by? He asked, because Violet blesses honest questions. The one we can't smell yet, Eliza said, because Gray blesses honest answers. He smiled with his eyes, which is where truth can afford to meet truth in public. By the time Nay's quiet audit finished not existing on any official record, Eliza's variance monitor tag had cooled to amber but stayed. Kelm's joy in that tiny, unearned stain was a friction the building could not fix. She adjusted by refusing to be the only person who knew how to do any part of what she did. Leisha learned to map air, Yari learned to ask Violet for heat without apologizing for math, Nem taught her apprentices to test before they took, Torin learned to hear, Vash drafted an audit summons and deleted it. Drafted a pilot authorization and deleted that. Drafted a commendation and burned the draft in the only ashtray in her life, her memory. To legalize cleverness too early is how systems sterilize infections that would have matured into medicines. She sent a different message. Eliza Thorne, informal recognition of root excellence. 10 minutes. Bring observations. No clerk. No seal. The kind of invitation an overworked administrator sends when she wants to feel the personality of a cohort and nothing else. She scheduled fan maintenance at Sterilizer 3 during Eliza's peak hour to force a reroute that would reveal either impatience or intelligence. Observation is clearer when you place one necessary obstacle and watch which path the river shapes. The invitation arrived while Eliza and Nem argued whether naming a tolerance is arrogance or love. Gold, Nem said, reading the header upside down. Do you want to hide? I want them to ask twice, Eliza said. She rescheduled politely. Then the maintenance order blocked her favorite siphon. She adjusted. She had already built 2 quieter channels and rehearsed them until they moved like habit. She sent Leisha to Violet with a coil justified later by Joe's handwriting on a retired form. She asked Yari to walk without his badge like a person confident enough to belong by behavior. She took a real break at Nem's, while the halo wet her shoulders and marked nothing except the dangerous fact that people existed. She arrived to Vash's office 7 minutes late, the precise amount that says, I am not your clock's enemy, but I am not its furniture. Miss Thorne, Vash said. Mild, not friendly. Respect. Proctora, Eliza said, returning the instrument tuned. Your variance is low. Completion above model. No incident increases, Vash said. Do you have observations? I have notes, Eliza said. Crimson discards at 10%. Sterilizers incinerate nominal. Green works elegantly at nominal. Azure calibrations tighten when moved out of weather. Violet needs heat more than poetry in winter. Diversion, Vash said. Reallocation, Eliza said. You have read the B forms. I have repaired around them. Why not propose through your line? Because procedure is how urgency is domesticated, Eliza said. We can submit paperwork after the leak is a memory. If we wait to propose, habit sets in the wrong direction. You are ambitious, Vash said carefully. I am efficient, Eliza said. If ambition arrives, I will ask it to wait. Thank you, Vash said, and dismissed her as if nothing had changed. Everything had, a little. They had measured each other's temperature. Neither had flinched. Vash did not legalize. Eliza did not confess. The halo went on listening. The siphon went on humming. Kelm escalated. Politeness became appetite. He followed Eliza's cart once, too closely. She slowed. He stopped. Men of Kelm's type are trained by a lifetime of corridors to confuse accident with permission. You're late to your sterilizer slot, he said. Fan maintenance, she said. Authorized. You move like you own the corridor. I move like the corridor knows my name. That can be adjusted, he said, and filed a procedural drift note that gave Crimson permission to ask questions if they felt bored later. Crimson bored is worse than Crimson angry. Anger burns out. Boredom collects trophies. Eliza went to Joe. He's going to sell my shadow to someone who thinks it will fit in their pocket, she said. Joe nodded. Then make another shadow. Don't let the first one think it's special. She diversified. She ceded a trick to Leisha and told her it was her idea. She gave Nem's apprentice responsibility for a micro-route and watched her grow 1 centimeter taller. She taught Yari to change his walk depending on which camera watched the corridor. The building, like a dog, only sees the postures you repeat. She also wrote a note to herself with all the solemnity of a promise. You are not allowed to be the center of the solution. If the Empire requires you to be a martyr to accept repair, The Empire is lying about loving repair. The building approved, the temperature eased by 1 degree over mezzanine 6 during first shift. Vash's signature did that, for reasons that would earn no statue and cause 3 fewer arguments a day. The incident that changed the game arrived with exquisite courtesy, as all true violence in stable systems does. It began with a number. Vash's ribbon did not show it. The ribbon is curated to soothe. A different interface, one curated to frighten woke on the far side of the Capital Spire, in the office of Auditor Primus Kirel of Gold Oversight. Kirel did not love consent. Kirel loved proof. His job, as he understood it, was to teach systems to remember they have teeth. A safety report crossed his desk. Green mezzanines reported a suppression foam deployment and a minor burn, apprentice with keywords electrical arc and energy cell. The B form 2 floors down called it no deterioration of imperial goods observed. The phrase no deterioration is a red rag to the part of gold that confuses absence of visible scars with the presence of justice. Kirel pulled a thread. He requested sterilizer throughput logs. He requested all of them. He did not ask before he took. His software scraped deltas. It drew a shape. The shape resembled Eliza Thorne's root cluster in the way handwriting resembles a hand. He did not call Vash. He filed compliant sweep theta, quiet across mid-spire gray. Quiet meant no public alarms, doors lock politely, interviews occur in soundproof kindness, carts are unpacked by gloved hands that apologize while they seize. Theta meant B forms suspended pending review, informal accommodations frozen, sterilizers retimed to accept only direct inputs, Crimson invited as observers. The sweep scheduled itself for sunrise, as if it were a festival. The notification propagated. Vash read it first in the corner of her vision, the way you notice a storm on the horizon by the sudden intelligence of birds. Kirel's signature had the hairline arrogance of men who do not know the uses of grace. She attempted to divert the timing. The system granted her the courtesy of a warning she had no authority to stop. You may annotate scope. You may not cancel oversight. She annotated ruthlessly. She patted the sweep with randomization to blur its focus. She shifted 2 interview teams away from green mezzanines. She ensured the first carts opened would be Kelm's, not Eliza's, because there is a small justice in letting appetite find its own reflection. Then she did something she did not do. She left her office. She did not intercept Eliza in a corridor. That would be theater. She walked to Nem's mezzanine and bought a bolt she did not need, and said, very quietly, the only sentence Gold is allowed to say when the machine is about to hurt someone intelligent on purpose. Begin your day as if the building remembers everything. Nem's copper sleeves did not move. Her eyes did. Who? Gray, Vash said. And anyone Gray touches. Why? Why? Because oversight confuses a bruise with a confession, Vash said. Nem's mouth became a razor. We had foam and a laugh. They had an empty quota, Vash said. Nem looked toward the corridor where Eliza's cart would appear as surely as a beat in a song. What do you want me to tell her? The truth, Vash said, and nothing I can be quoted as having said. Nem nodded once. Then go back to your rooms that never ask permission. I am trying not to love them, Vash said, and left. Nem wiped her hands, picked up a coil she did not need to move, and said to the air, Lisha, darling, if you're running too fast to hear, slow down. We have a festival. His note is road flang way. Eliza rounded the corner with her cart at the exact speed of a woman who knows the habits of a city by the sound its vents make at dawn. She saw Nem's face, then the way Violet's door had been propped with exaggerated casualness, then the fact that Azure's stare had acquired a new polite sign. Thank you for your patience. Recalibration in progress. Her wristband chimed. Compliance sweep theta quiet. Sunrise. Root clusters MS44 through -57. Kelm's grin preceded him around a different corner like an odor. Random checks, he sang, as if singing made him kind. Nothing to fear, if everything is nominal. Eliza stood very still. She allowed fear exactly 1 heartbeat to write a ruin on the inside of her ribs. Then she asked it to stand aside for competence. Nem, she said, without looking away from Kelm. Do you have my preventive maintenance morale stimulant receipt? Nem lifted the ledger that hid the coffee and did not smile. Filed. With excellent penmanship. Eliza shifted the weight in her cart. She moved one legitimate crate to the top, one shadow crate to the bottom, and loosened a wheel bearing exactly enough to squeal like trouble at the correct threshold, knowing the compliance teams would follow the squeal because compliance prefers theater to arithmetic when frightened. Leisha appeared, breath only slightly wild, and slid in on Eliza's left like a thought you choose. Yari appeared on her right, badge conspicuously visible. Petersiel stepped into Violet's doorway and began humming the low note that made cheap candles pretend to be expensive. Torin, at the far end of the corridor, placed one hand on his crate and the other on his throat, a soldier's signal he had invented during the 5 minutes in his life when no one was watching. I hear. Eliza looked at Nem and said, softly, the sentence you use when a repair becomes a stand. Consent is a muscle. Nem nodded. Exercise it, she said. Doors along the mid-spire clicked. Soft. Kind. Final. The sweep arrived, smiling. Doors along mid-spire clicked with the kindness of a good lie. Compliance. Sweep theta. Quiet poured into the corridors in soft soles and matte gloves, the color of sand that never dirties. Their faces wore the well-practiced smile of nothing here is personal. Their kit cases opened like polite mouths. Behind them, the thin scent of disinfected authority settled over everything that breathed. They followed the squeal. Eliza had loosened the left front bearing of her cart, a quarter turn just enough to sing through the mezzanine threshold, the way a student clears her throat before giving the answer everyone already knows. Auditors, frightened by the possibility of arithmetic, prefer theater. They orient to sound. The lead auditor, a young gold with the earnest competence of someone who had read kindness as technique twice, tilted her head toward the squeal and said, there, as if solving a scavenger hunt. The randomization matrix Vash had annotated her hand inside the dice selected first 3 carts with ritual serenity and, by sheer chance, landed on the person most likely to embarrass himself. Kelm. He was talking before the auditors reached him. Men like Kelm inoculate themselves by narrating. Compliance is a friend, he said, unlocking his crates with great generosity. We welcome friends. His smile was a staircase, with one missing step. Soft tools rose from soft boxes. A coil lifted, paper properly wrapped. The serial number glittered wrong. It belonged to Crimson Intake 2 floors up, a purchase under weapons readiness that had wandered into gray hands without the correct procession of signatures. Odd, the auditor murmured, still smiling. This allocation prefix belongs to Crimson, a clerical love letter, Kelm said brightly. I can show you the informal accommodation clause. He tapped his slate. Form B 117 appeared in the friendliest font the Empire owned, or upon mutual informal accommodation where no deterioration of imperial goods is observed. Of course, the auditor said. And the partner for this mutual accommodation? Green, Kelm replied, pointing toward Nem's mezzanine, as if to a priest whose blessings he had prepaid. Nem did not look up. She had already set her ledger to the correct page. Excellent penmanship is not a compliment in green, it's an ethic. Her letters were small and disciplined, the columns lined like soldiers, the signatures hers. Registrar 4 Ardines were shapes you could trust even while you hated trusting anything. The coil's serial did not appear in those neat lines. We'll hold this, the auditor said, placing it into a foam cradle with the tenderness of disarming a child. Kelm furnished more crates. The auditors found his second stash, an auxiliary cart papered with variance approvals he had been selling like breath in a crowded room. Permission commodified. 1,000 small schedule infidelities regularized by his flourish in a corner where eye glaze makes oversight gentle. Your approvals are unusually enthusiastic, another auditor observed, tone unchanged. In a living system, Kelm replied with priestly calm. Permission is a verb. Yes, said the auditor, writing the sentence down as evidence. They asked for partner names. Kelm gave them the wrong ones, people who owed him favors. Nem's ledger, which smelled of truthful labor, quietly disagreed where it mattered. Who is Maintenance Tech E. Thorne? an auditor asked. Finger on a clean sequence received, divided by logged, divided by reconciliation. By that ran like a vein, through 3 mezzanines, and emerged without bleeding. A gray, Kelm said too quickly. Takes initiative. Perhaps too much. We are keeping an eye. We prefer 2, the auditor said, mouth-only smile. The theater required symmetry. Having made a villain, the scene now demanded a saint. They turned to Eliza's cart because the squeal asked them to. She had staged its contents with careful laziness. Legitimate crates on top, B-forms taped in obvious places, a registered preventive maintenance morale stimulant receipt, tucked where glove A could find it without permitting ego B to feel needed. Sterilizer feedstock? The lead auditor asked, making conversation with a crate to spare the person. Yes, Eliza said. Intake logs here. Temperatures inside the band. Mass drift with ingrantable variation. She offered a printout annotated in an honest hand, her own that had learned discipline on labels, not vellum. Morale stimulant? Registered and consumed on premises, Eliza said, indicating Nem's ledger with its devastating neatness. Partner identification. Nem. Green. Rationed Tier 2. Witness? Registrar 4 Ardeen, Eliza and Nem said, simultaneously, without glancing. The auditors enjoyed the harmony like a well-timed duet. Yari wandered up with a mirror housing in both arms, badge conspicuously visible, and waited, patient as a fixed star. Calibration run moved to Climate Bay, he said to the room. Error range tightened, happy to share data. One auditor kind eyes. Learned failure glanced at the housing. Moved out of weather, he repeated, tasting sin and salvation in equal parts. Within policy, Eliza said. B-117 permits informal accommodations where no deterioration is observed. We observed improvement. They opened 3 more of her crates because performance requires an empty chest. The crates were boring in the way clean teeth are. The auditors enjoyed their boredom, scribbling gratitude disguised as protocol. Your initials are very consistent, a clerk noted, comparing a flourish on one page to a flourish on another. They have to be, Eliza said. Gray hands write labels none of you wish to read wrong. They nodded. They moved on, following the squeal toward the last act. Kelm's slate, entitled Trust, Time, Commodified, Favors, Tallied, Signatures, Sloppy. We will need to speak with you, the lead auditor told Kelm, about supervisory boundaries. Kelm nodded the nod of a man skilled at absorbing reprimands without metabolizing lessons. Polite seizure stickers bloomed on his carts. Review, the font loudly discreet. Down the mezzanine, Peter Seal hummed the low note that convinces cheap candles to behave. Torin at Crimson Intake kept his eyes on his own crate. Survival sometimes looks like inattention. Kirel watched all feeds from his office with a predator's stillness. He did not smile at Kelm's humiliation. Embarrassing Kelm is gravity. He did not frown when Eliza's cart read as hymn. Hymns can be forged. He marked her flourish in a private note and closed the stream. On paper, the sweep concluded perfectly. A villain exposed, a system soothed, a narrative satisfied. In truth, it failed. Proctora Vash returned to her office with a bolt she did not need and fed it to the desk's hidden drawer the way a handler feeds a tamed animal. Here, chew this instead of the furniture. Kirel's report arrived, dressed in understatement. Theta sweep. Clusters. M. S. 4. 4. 57. Findings. Kelm's gracelessness. Elegantly itemized. Recommendations that corrected nothing and encouraged everything. Footnotes, leaving several gray routes. Eliza's included, tagged variants. Monitor and a stubborn amber. Vash read the report as signature. A man who believes truth is a property of force. She pulled the internal trace of the randomization she had nudged and watched her ghosted choices become fate. Then she sent a message that avoided the word summons on principle. Eliza Thorne, post-sweep review. Informal. Now. Eliza arrived at their established lateness. Respect that refuses to be eaten. I warned Nem, Vash said before the room could settle into its rituals. She told me, Eliza replied. which meant we are already co-conspirators in pace, if not in law. Auditor Kirel sees a crime, Vash said, laying steel on the desk in the form of a sentence. I see a function. His sweep failed, but he will not stop. Your network is no longer a leak. It is a strategic asset. You will continue, but you will do it for me. You will be my eyes in the seams. In return, I will provide the consent that keeps Kirel's teeth off your throat. And. What does for you mean? Eliza asked, weighing irreplaceables. Report where the Empire lies to itself in ways numbers can't fix, Vash said. Tell me which rituals are breaking joints, which joints are carrying loads. Ritual refuses to name. I will adjust pressure heat here, timers there, incentives elsewhere. I will not legalize you. I will keep you alive. And when patience is misquoted? Eliza asked. When a man who loves the word proof demands blood? Then I will become loud, Vash said. But quiet victory becomes habit. Loud victory becomes a story someone else will use to sell noise. My price? You will change, Vash said. You will hate me for it. You may save us with it. I won't apologize. Eliza looked at the census ribbon, the Empire's self-portrait in flattering light, then back at the woman who wore rooms like weapons. Consent, she said, testing for hairline fractures in the word. Shield and pace, Vash said. Not safety. Kirel counts teeth. He prefers theater to arithmetic, Eliza murmured. He is about to change theaters, Vash said. What does he have? A bruise, Vash replied. Nem's apprentice, minor burn. Foam, then laughter. He will carry the bruise to Crimson and ask them to call it doctrine. Then we are not talking about compliance anymore, Eliza said. No, Vash answered. We're talking about war that thinks it is a prayer. Eliza nodded once. How do we make enough survive a doctrine that has decided to be hungry? I need your roots to disappear into paperwork. Kirel would insult himself to read, Vash said. Your people will keep their hands in their pockets when Crimson looks their way and take them out clean. I will give you air where doors would have been. I will slow gears he wants to speed. In return, Eliza said, repeating the test. In return, you bring me the hurt before it becomes a headline, Vash said. Tell me where consent fails. Lie to Kirel. Tell me the truth. My network is not monarchy, Eliza said. I won't be the center of your solution. Good, Vash said. Centers attract fire. Be everywhere else. Then I'll be your eyes in the seams, Eliza said, on the condition you never mistake me for furniture. If I do, Vash replied, set me on fire. Nem will enjoy that, Eliza said. She'll insist on a better torch, Vash said, and let humor expire for the sake of the front. The treaty they signed without ink had 3 articles. Function over theater. Pace is power. Consent where possible. Obstruction where necessary. They would test the ink before day's end. Kirel did not bring Nem's apprentice's bruise to compliance. He carried it into Crimson like a relic. Crimson's reception chamber was aggressively honest. Banners that never drooped. Weapons stanced like animals that had decided to be loyal. A floor scrubbed by people who never get thanked. Pride in Crimson is a door key. Commander Atrix met him with theorem-clean features. Her scars read victories at standard cost. She wore the humorless serenity of doctrine well kept. Gold oversight, she said. Summarize your need. Security risk, Kirel said, offering the bruise like a witness. Gray market activity in mid-spire creates variance in energy handling. Unauthorized diversion of munitions waste into artisan spaces. Arc incident. Minor now. Fatal later. Doctrine. Violated. Doctrine, she repeated. The word, a plumb line. Full charge. Exactly. Gray is teaching the Empire to tolerate nominal. Nominal is slippage. Slippage is drift. Drift kills warriors. Atrix glanced toward a ring of names carved into stone. The dead of a war the Empire refuses to name correctly, because accuracy sounds like failure of supply. Drift kills, she agreed. We countermand drift with doctrine. I propose a tribunal, Kirel said. Crimson led, gold advised, purpose, investigate and sterilize the Greycast's doctrinal threat. Atrix keyed orders with fingers that had never mistyped. Tribunal convened, she said. Full crimson. Advisory from gold. Yourself. Mandate. Investigation and sterilization of deviation from full charge doctrine in mid-spire. Gray activities. Clusters MS44 to -57. Kirel nodded, not trusting his mouth to avoid flourish. Thank you, Commander. Be correct, she said. He left, satisfied. Atrix remained, gaze steady on the ring of names. Warriors plan for failure. That is their secret kindness. The news traveled the way everything important does, by temperature, by smell, by the way rooms change their posture. Nem felt it first, Crimson Tribunal Doctrine Integrity Site Preparation, sliding under her ledger's top page. The blocks of time looked like teeth that had made up their minds. Vash saw a new color on the wall ribbon, a shade reserved for unquestioned. Her console allowed her to annotate scope, not cancel oversight. The machine would not stop itself. Joe, old enough to be invisible on demand, slipped through a door and returned pale. Uniforms, she said, not observers. A table with punishment built into its corners. Eliza pressed her palm to a sterilizer casing, as if asking the building whether to inhale or exhale. Crimson, she said. Crimson lead, Joe confirmed. Gold advising. A soft knife of a man. Kirel, Eliza said. They convened at Nem's bench. Vash, Eliza, Nem, Yari, Pater Seal, Torin, Joe, Lisha. The Seam received them. Receipts, Eliza told Nem. All of them. Not the pretty ones. The messy commas. We must love them now. Nem produced the ledger she kept in reserve. Lines of preventive maintenance morale stimulant mapped like a joy she refused to be ashamed of. Excellent penmanship, Eliza said, meaning, this could save a life if the clerk prefers neat to true. Crimson doesn't like penmanship, Nem warned. They like witnesses, Eliza replied. We'll borrow some. Seal arrived with unasked-for usefulness. We can ring rites of safety, he said. Stand in the doorway and sing the note that holds a room together. Legal. Annoying. Use it only if they break the ledger, Nem said. It will make them petty before it makes them merciful. Yari held up his error ranges. Climate Bay tightened the numbers. Doctrine adjacent. Bring 3 copies, Eliza said. 1 to mock, 1 to ignore, 1 to pocket. Torin, hovering at the threshold like a man cultivating plausible deniability, spoke without moving his mouth. Atrix, he said. Exact. The kind who'd break a sword rather than file it wrong. When they say full, watch their hands, Eliza told him. If fingers move, they have a habit they haven't dignified as law. Ask a question about verbs. Requires, forbids, sterilizes. Then stand still. It won't save me, Torin said. It may buy a beat, Eliza said. Sometimes a beat moves a cart. Vash joined, visibly out of place in gray air and refusing the comfort of belonging. Kirel has turned this into doctrine, she said. I can't stop the rite. I can slow it. More steps, more recitations, witness order that starves his momentum. Is it enough? Eliza asked. No, Vash said. But it's time, and time is a solvent. You made me your eyes, Eliza said. You'll need to be my lungs. I will breathe for you where the room is thin, Vash said. Assignments fell into place. Seal would stand in the doorway when the ledger was threatened and shame the rude. Yari would submit clean numbers without apology. Nem would read B117 and B117B like scripture and make Gold feel elegant approving them. Torin would ask the question about hands. Joe would mark which crimson eyes didn't match their mouths. Lisha would run. And me? Eliza asked. You will be the most boring gray in the room, Vash said. Answer exactly. Do not defend. Constrain your verbs to carry, log, observe. Make them tired. Making men tired is a family skill, Eliza said, and almost smiled. If I tell you to stop, Vash added, ignore me. If I tell you to apologize, Eliza countered, do it with HVAC, not with your mouth. Agreed, Vash said. They walked toward the room with teeth. Crimson never convenes halfway. The tribunal chamber was a geometry lesson, a table whose corners were a fraction sharper than courtesy, witness benches precisely 2 steps from dignity, a dais where doctrine had a chair and no cushion. Atrix presided at volume 0. Kirel sat to her right with findings stacked like a blade kit. They began with theater's necessary villain. Kelm, Atrix called. He performed disgrace, as if the suit had been tailored for him. The coils, the sloppy ledger titled Trust, the variance approvals for sales sanctions fell exactly calibrated to sting and not instruct. Kirel did not blink. This was not the blood he wanted. Nem, Atrix said, voice flat. Nem brought her hands in her ledger. She read B117 and B117B with a cadence that made commas breathe. Registrar 4 Ardeen confirmed his signature with the paleness of a man unused to being correct in public. Preventive maintenance morale stimulant, Atrix read, tasting the Empire's euphemism. Logged, Nem said. Performed. No deterioration observed. Doctrine is absolute at point of fire. Doctrine is silent at point of waste. Silence is not prohibition. Specificity does not imply permission, Kirel said. Omission does not imply prohibition, Vash replied, voice like paper that could cut. Yari, Atrix called. He presented error ranges. He refused to be ashamed of numbers. Moved out of weather, Kirel poked. Within policy, Yari returned. Atrix touched the digit with her fingertip, confirming a pulse. Pater seal, Atrix called. He did not sing. He spoke of candles and breath and rooms that hold together because people choose to be gentle. Violet's contribution to doctrine is embarrassment. He weaponized it lightly. Torin, Atrix said, saving the dangerous honesty for last. Torin described intake like a manual. Full charge, he said, and the room's spine lengthened. Reject at 10%. Incinerate. Sterilize variance. Have you observed gray interference? Kirel asked. I have observed the Empire undervalues boredom, Torin said. Answer the question. I have observed that when we train hands to hear, they make fewer mistakes, Torin said. Nominal energy used for non-weapon function becomes excellence where doctrine is indifferent. Kirel's smile sharpened. Have you observed diversions? Torin looked at his hands and asked Atrix the question Eliza had given him. Commander, when we say full, what do our hands do? They do not move, Atrix said. They remember. Then hands full of doctrine can carry memory, Torin answered. If a Grey teaches my hands to hear a warning crack in a casing, did doctrine fail, or did she protect it? Enough, Atrix said, not to silence courage, but to count it. Kirel raised Nem's apprentice's incident like a banner. Minor burn. Arc. Energy cell in artisan space. He turned the bruise into relic. Call Eliza Thorne, Atrix said, ending his monologue. Eliza walked as if carrying air. She placed her palms on the wood, open. Name, Eliza Thorne, cased, gray. Function, waste management, roots, labels, observation. Did you divert energy cells rejected by doctrine to green, azure, or violet? No, Eliza said. Kirel's eyes brightened. Atrix. Clarify. Divert implies carving a new channel, stealing pressure, Eliza said. I observed grantable variation in sterilizer intake mass. I used B-forms that legalize informal accommodation where no deterioration is observed. I carried logged waste within approved corridors to logged partners for logged purposes. I didn't create a stream. I kept the Spire from drowning in its own ritual. You built a shadow economy, Kirel said. I built a habit of care, Eliza said. Shadow economies sell scarcity. We distributed enough. Enough is not doctrine, Kirel said. Enough is why doctrine survives, Vash answered. Atrix raised her hand. Eliza Thorne, do you believe Grey is qualified to decide where absolute ends and tolerance begins? No, Eliza said, and let Kirel taste triumph for half a heartbeat. Grey is qualified to observe when waste kills usefulness. When doctrine is indifferent to a domain, we repair. When doctrine speaks, we carry. I have never handled a rifle. I do not make war. I throw away fear and keep what is nominal so Nem can make lathes purr and Pater can keep children attentive through winter. Is that a confession? Kirel asked. That you kept what should be thrown away? It's a job description, Eliza said. Atrix reread the apprentice's arc incident. You trained apprentices to test before use? She asked Nem. Yes, Nem said. A tired hand missed a hairline. My failure. And my intake, Torin said. Do you accept responsibility for the environment in which the arc occurred? Kirel asked Eliza. Yes, she said. For operating within legal permissions to prevent greater waste while making error less lethal, we will fix variables, tighten checks. I will. But if you sterilize nominal to feed doctrine, your priests will be cold, your makers clumsy, your sky counters wind-burned liars, and your soldiers will die, not from drift at muzzle, but from brittle stock and jammed bolts and a supply line that cannot tolerate being human. 7 meaning. In his bringly hands of Rove Browns. The sermon, Kirel said softly. Reserve your adjectives, Atrix told him. She turned to the room, addressing the air because the air remembers. Doctrine remains absolute at point of fire. At point of waste, doctrine is silent. Silence is not chaos. It is a delegation. Today, we will not sterilize nominal. We will sterilize carelessness. Nem's shop, inspected. Torin's intake, audited by Crimson. Azure Climate Bay, certified. Violet rights, left alone. Gray roots, monitored by gold with respect. When numbers falter or bodies bleed, we reconvene. Kirel accepted deferment the way a man swallows a seed he intends to plant elsewhere. Advisory, he added smoothly. Gold Oversight will open doctrinal review of B117 divided by B117B. Informal accommodation must have limits. Consent cannot be a blanket over smoldering variance. Consent is not a blanket, Vash said. It is a cooling system. Then we will test for leaks, Kirel replied. Do, Vash said, like a woman agreeing to rain. The gavel thumped softly. The room released its jaw. Nem exhaled. Yari folded numbers for reuse. Pater Seal tapped the doorway with his knuckles. Torin trained his hands again to remember both doctrine and hairlines. Eliza stepped away from the bench with the precise absence of theater that warns a hunter he has missed. Atrix watched Kirel pack his papers. She had used him to articulate a wound and denied him the glory of blood. Kirel would not forgive being function. The alliance between Vash and Eliza, unwilling, now undeniable, tightened. They met in an unloved stairwell that specializes in confessions without fee. There will be a B-form review, Vash said. Kirel cannot endure a clause he didn't write making the Empire move. He'll try to criminalize honesty, Eliza said. He'll try to own it, Vash corrected. He's moved out of compliance into doctrine. Next is myth. The schedule board reflected the shift. The polite observers of Part 1 disappeared. Their slots were replaced by tribunal, full crimson on a recurring cadence. The blocks of time looked like teeth that had decided to bite. Vash received the order as a scar. Scope expanded network sterilization protocol, B117, divided by B117, B interpretive boundaries, advisory, Kirel. Eliza received it as smoke. A bulletin with too many capitals for a city that runs on lowercase repairs. Nem felt it as a temperature drop. Her lathe stuttered. Machines read air. Pater Ciel felt it as a question without melody. Torin felt it as a hand on the neck. Remember who owns your doctrine. Leisha felt it as a race. Legs alone cannot win. Joe tasted salt. They assembled at the seam again. This isn't a quiet audit anymore, Vash said. Kirel petitioned Crimson ritualists for a doctrinal clarification session, the kind that rewrites verbs. He will argue, nominal is treasonous near soldiers. He will carry the bruise like a relic, and ask rooms to kiss it. He will succeed, Nem said, already ordering supplies for a storm. People prefer fear to cold. Then we make them warm, Eliza said, while he makes them afraid. Fear walks faster, Seal said. Then build corners where it must slow, Vash replied. Add steps, Witnesses, forms, force him to talk to people he would never greet. Inbay stated. Minus. Hand. And if he wins? Yari asked. If they sterilize nominal, criminalize consent? Eliza studied the callus on her tug cart grip, the ink stain on her thumb. Then we learn to repair under war, she said, and we count our dead. Not if I can pace the blade, Vash said. Not if I can bend the oath. You intend oath work? Eliza asked. I intend to make the machine promise itself not to break, Vash said. Later, not now. Now, Eliza said. We teach our people to stand in rooms with teeth and keep their fingers. They dispersed to their tasks. The corridors braced. At the end of shift, Eliza tightened the squealing bearing until silence returned. Auditors would not be following sound next time. They would follow the iron scent of doctrine and the sweet rod of myth. Her band chimed with the day's final message, condensing the new war into one sentence. Tribunal reconvenes. Crimson lead. Gold advisory. Kirel. Mandate. Investigate and sterilize gray doctrinal threat. Eliza sent a single reply to a single recipient. The true measure of alliance is the shape of small words. To Vash, consent is a muscle. We'll need yours. From Vash, breathe. Eliza adjusted the weight in her cart, then the weight in her chest. She moved into the seam. The chamber for doctrinal review was larger than the room with teeth and quieter. Crimson had built it for wars that believed themselves to be literature. The banners were the same austere red. The floor had the same honesty of scars cleaned afterward by people who never got thanked. But the dais here carried 3 chairs. On the left sat Auditor Primus Kirel of Gold Oversight, with a stack of briefs that smelled like victory, impersonating hygiene. On the right sat Proctora Vash, hands still as a verdict. Between them, higher by a precise 2 centimeters, Commander Atrix presided, exact as a plumb line. The question before them was not a skirmish, it was a grammar. What did the Empire mean when it said consent, repair, and law? The Right Keeper read the purpose in the tone you use to inform heir that it has been conscripted. Review and clarify. B. 117. Divided by. B. 117b. Informal accommodation. Determine doctrinal status of cross-caste repair in waste and logistics. Atrix inclined her head. Auditor Kirel. Present. Kirel stood with the calm of a man who has organized his sentences like troops. Honored Commander, Proctora, Council, he began, and his voice did the gold thing that makes even enemies nod for the first paragraph. 10,000 years have taught us this. Stability is not a lack of motion. It is motion calibrated. Our doctrine is the instrument that keeps pitch. Informal accommodation B 117, and its variorum was a stopgap for frontier edges and famine years. It permitted small deviations where measurement failed. That age is gone. The B forms have become a leak in doctrine. He raised a clean page. Nem's apprentice's incident, printed so neutrally it felt obscene. Here, a minor burn an arc in an artisan mezzanine from a cell rejected at 10%. Small, yes, but small is how systems fail. 1,000 forgivenesses that teach the body to accept sepsis as character. He paced once, precise. Informality breeds theater. People learn to perform compliance, excellent penmanship, admirable receipts while moving energy and permission without doctrine's supervision. The result is chaos in slow motion. Security risk. Drift. A culture in which repair performed by unaccountable hands claims the sanctity of law. He let the word sanctity sit like a beetle no one wanted to touch. And Proctora Vash's quiet management? Kirel continued, gaze steady on the braid of gold at Vash's collar. It is negligence in courtly dress. She prefers to observe rather than correct. She adjusted a randomization to embarrass a petty supervisor useful theater while permitting a network to flourish that cannot exist without injury to doctrine. She warned an artisan before a sweep. He did not present the proof yet. He allowed it to glimmer like a hook. Kirel bowed at the end of his blade. Retire the B-forms. Sterilize informal. If repair is useful, write it into doctrine with crimson clarity and gold control. Until then, variance is treason dressed as housekeeping. Saturday. The quiet had weight. Atrix's eyes moved to Vash. Proctora. Vash did not rise at once. She let Kirel's sentences cool into metal that could be handled without burning. Commander, Auditor, Counsel, she said at last, voice like a scale that has never lied. The Auditor is correct in one premise. A system that requires informal accommodation to function is not a perfect system. It is a system lying to itself. The B forms were designed as a tourniquet. We have mistaken them for an artery that is on gold. Kirel did not smile, which improved him. Vash continued, ruthless with her own house. But the Auditor's remedy sterilization will break us. We have 10,000 years of proof on the wall. Perfection is not the absence of variance, it is the governance of variance. Without repair, the machine becomes brittle. Without law, repair becomes monarchy. She lifted her hand. A projection rose. The census ribbons waste energy thread, the sterilizer loads, the mezzanine temperatures. The error ranges Yari had brought with the dignity of a young scientist who had decided to be obvious until a system forgot how to count subtle things. I am not here to defend the B forms, Vash said. I am here to declare them obsolete. We will replace informal accommodation with doctrine, not theater, not permission sold under a clerk's sigh. Doctrine. I present the new charter. Silence altered its posture. Even the banners seemed to listen. Vash gestured. A second projection bloomed. A draft whose title was both humble and insurgent. Form C1. The Doctrine of Repair. Crosscast Charter for Waste Stream Optimization and Functional Consent. She did not read like a pamphleteer. She read like a builder, giving instructions to a crew. Premise. Full charge at point of fire remains absolute. At point of waste, doctrine is silent. Form C1 defines that silence as delegated authority to repair. Article 1. Functional consent. Repair is lawful when A. The receiving function's tolerances are documented. B. No deterioration of goods occurs. C. The benefit is communal, not private. Article 2. Adaptive thresholds. Nominal inputs are classified for green, azure, violet domains under tolerances set by Crimson Safety Engineering. Article 3. Gray Logistics Authority. A named officer is empowered to route nominal streams within sealed corridors, with gold oversight, crimson audit, and public ledgers. Article 4. Proof obligations. Repair must reduce brittleness incidence by X%, improve Azure error ranges by Y%, and lower sterilizer energy draw by Z% per quarter. Failure dissolves authority. Article 5. Oath of Function. The Proctora's seal is bound to C1 performance. If repair drifts into theft or drift raises risk, the seal suspends itself. The Proctora's office converts to caretaker until variance returns within bounds. Her last line was an old kind of courage. She just placed her own power on the table like a hand you intend to keep steady while someone measures it. This is my oath work, Vash said, finally turning to Kirel. Auditor, you argued for sterilization. I argue for evolution. The B forms are indeed a flaw. We retire them by replacing them. Atrix's gaze tilted a fraction. Form C1 exists? It will in 30 minutes, Vash said, because function is not rhetoric, it is built. While gold and crimson traded verbs, Gray wrote nouns. In Nem's mezzanine, the room that behaved like a lung, Eliza spread a blank folio that was not a ledger and would not lie for her. Yari's numbers, already clean, marched into tables that could withstand an insult. Pater Ciel drew diagrams of heat stability with a pen that had baptized babies. Torin, careful hands enormous with attention, laid out intake logs that named hairlines before they became names carved into stone. Joe drew a simple flow map that anyone could read. Here's where waste killed usefulness. Here's where usefulness learned to breathe. Don't call it a manifesto, Nem said. Manifestos rot. It's a manual, Eliza replied. With teeth. They named it a gray paper because irony is a shield and a mirror both. Gray paper C. 1 implementation draft. Waste stream optimization as readiness doctrine. The paper did not plead. it measured. Green. The 3-week trial of nominal energy supply reduced lathe stoppages by 18% and increased tool life by 11%. Surplus time diverted to maintenance training reduced apprentice error incidents by 31%. Azure. Relocation of calibration to Climate Bay produced a 36% improvement in error range, stability across 6 mirror sets. Rechecks on the roof correlated with wind shear, not variance in the optics. Moving the ritual indoors did not anger the sky. Violet. Heat stability improved candle cap reliability and reduced mid-right interruptions by 42%. Crowd dispersion events declined. No one likes numbers about feelings. Ciel made them edible. Crimson. Microfracture rates in rifle stocks dropped 22% in the same window. Jam frequency declined 9%. A small pilot at intake, hands trained to hear, reduced rejected casing re-breakage by 47%. Torrens column, written with embarrassment and pride, both honest. Empire. Sterilizer energy draw decreased 14% along clusters MS44 to 57. The saved power warmed 3 dormitories, 1 degree. Joe labeled them children on the graph in letters even Kirel could not bear to hate. At the bottom, they wrote proof of function in a font without flourish. Beneath that, signatories. Nem of Green signed first, copper sleeve sliding back. Yari of Azure signed with the precise handwriting of a man who has stopped apologizing for math. Pater Seal signed with a line so clean it could have been a prayer. Torrent of Crimson paused, then wrote his name small. Doctrine hates modesty less than it hates arrogance. Joe made an X and then, irritated with herself, printed her name slow. Leisha added runner, in parentheses, as if to tell some future clerk where to send thanks. Eliza did not sign. You're the author, Nem said. I'm the courier, Eliza answered. Gray carries. The form must live without my name. Nem looked at her with the skin prick feeling you get when someone steps precisely into the space you had kept for your respect. Then carry it. Eliza carried it not as contraband, but as an object the room should have thought to invent on its own. Back in the tribunal, Kirel played the part he was built to play. Intelligent opposition. He did not scoff at C1. He dissected it. Articles 1 through 5, he said, tapping each as if counting vertebrae. Functional consent will shelter theft, renamed. Adaptive thresholds invite miscalibration. A gray logistics authority creates a shadow fief. Proof obligations build perverse incentives. Officers will chase metrics instead of safety. And the oath of function Proctora. You bind your seal to a feedback loop you cannot control. This is grandeur, as governance. Vash nodded once, infuriatingly, approving the quality of the attack. Auditor, your caution is the useful kind, but we are already living your nightmare without the tools to survive it. The B-forms laundered repair through the fiction of informality. By refusing to formalize the thing that keeps us alive, we have left it vulnerable to your kind of virtue. Atrix raised a palm. You may both be right. Where is the function? As if the room had been waiting for the cue, Eliza arrived by the simplest route, the door. An escort tried to make it theater. She refused the gesture by walking slightly faster than the choreography permitted. Proctora, Eliza said, and set the gray paper on the table where doctrine goes to live or die. Commander, Kirel did not hide his interest. He is not a fool. He does not like being surprised by competence. What is this? Atrix asked, not because she couldn't read, but because she wanted the room to practice saying the name of the thing it would soon obey. Form C1 implementation draft, Eliza answered, the proof obligations written as measurements, then performed as work. Atrix scanned the columns the way people drink water after a long march, purposefully, without theater. Her gaze paused at Crimson. Microfractures, she said. Real. Torrens stood from the witness bench and approached with the permission Atrix had not given, but had decided to allow. Commander, he said, hands steady as a level. We trained hands to hear. We incinerated the cracked. We redirected the boring. Stocks broke less. Bolts jammed less. This feels like doctrine, not treason. Yari offered his Climate Bay printouts, presented not to impress, but to be checked. You can reproduce this, he said, catching Kirel's eye. You can make me wrong in public if I cheated. Kirel, to his credit, looked satisfied to be denied the pleasure. Truth is a perversion even in his house. Nem added the ledger pages that had learned how to speak quintuple. We logged what we did, then we did what we logged. The B-forms kept us alive by pretending we were not doing it. See, one stops the pretending. Ciel remained at the threshold, where his craft lives. Advance function, he said. Rights will survive. Atrix read the signatures. Names are the hinges, real doors turn on. She turned to Kirel. Auditor, counter. Kirel pulled out his final card, the blade he had kept sheathed in decorum. It gleamed when truth is asked to bleed. Proctora vash, he said, and his voice lost none of its polish as it became an accusation. Even if we accept that a new charter might save function, you come to this chamber with unclean hands. You warned Nem Green Artisan prior to a compliance sweep. Here, he projected the message trace. It was not the content Vash had used, no words that a lawyer couldn't make virtuous. It was the timing, the path, the way a door opens when it isn't supposed to. The breadcrumb that ties a goal to a mezzanine without a clerk in the middle. You contaminated an investigation, Kirel said. You bent randomization. You protected a network under audit. You are a Proctora sworn to order. Silence turned a degree colder. Even Atrix's shoulders settled into a posture that looked a lot like weather. Vash did not flinch, which is the most dangerous honesty. Yes, she said. No adjective, no excuse. She let the word enter the room and choose its own height. It was not a warning, Vash continued. It was a test of the system's immune response. Auditor Kirel's sweep was a blunt instrument, loud where learning requires quiet. My observation protected a function long enough to measure it. The function is the law, not the form. You can punish me for choosing the right patient and the right antibiotic. You cannot call it treason to keep a necessary organ from being removed with a ceremonial knife. Kirel seized triumph. There. She admits it. Treason, renamed. Vash took one step for her, a march. Commander Atrix, she said, I am not here to bless informal. I am here to bury it. Bind me to the new charter. Make my seal the censor. If repair becomes theft, my authority suspends. If variance rises, my office becomes caretaker. I will stake myself on functional consent. That is the oath. Her words did not rise. They went down into the floor, into the discipline of the room, and found purchase. Atrix looked at the ring of names on the far wall. The room with teeth had always fed on nouns. Today it was being asked to swallow a verb. This army, Atrix said quietly, has lost more soldiers to brittle systems than to enemy fire. She raised her eyes. We will not sterilize repair. We will sterilize carelessness. We will retire B-117 and B-117B. We will adopt Form C-1, the doctrine of repair, as law. Kirel's breath drew a blade-shaped line. Commander, you will sit, Atrix said, not loud, and advise as numbers warrant, not as fear prefers. She turned to Vash. Proctora, your oath is accepted. Your seal binds to C1 metrics. Fail, and your office suspends. Succeed, and the Empire breathes on purpose. Is the mask sin and gray? Eliza asked, hands still open on the table, because Gray always has to ask who will be asked to carry the weight. Atrix allowed the softness of a practical mercy. Gray Logistics is now a capital office. Director Eliza Thorne will establish the Waste Stream Authority under Gold Oversight and Crimson Audit. Your routes are no longer crimes, they are corridors. Nem exhaled the way craftsmen do when a part finally seats and the machine stops lying. Yari's shoulders dropped a centimeter. Seal let himself hum a single note, quiet enough not to be a right, strong enough to be a promise. Torin closed his eyes and saw a stalk that would not break in a storm. Kirel stood, because pride requires legs. Then enter my descent into the record, he said, voice dangerously calm. The new charter will be captured by the very ingenuity it blesses. Your oath work will become theater. Someone will die. When they do, I will be waiting with the old doctrine in my hands. Vash inclined her head. We will need you, she said. It was both generosity and a trap. To remind us of the cost when we are tempted to love the story more than the work. Atrix struck the closing block. It did not sound like victory. It sounded like a schedule changing its mind. Because oaths are not words but systems, the first payment had to be made. Vash carried her seal to the wall in her office that had never admitted fingerprints and pressed it into the new matrix that C1 required. The surface warmed, then cooled, then accepted. A line of text appeared, so small it would have been missed by a lesser administrator. Seal-bound, functional consent, active. She felt it, which surprised her, not pain. Weight. The weight of not being allowed to pretend that observation absolves responsibility. If C1 failed, her office would not merely be embarrassed. It would go still, locked by the oath, until someone better took it. In the mezzanine, Eliza put on a badge that managed to be both new and unglamorous. Director, Gray Logistics. It sat on her chest like a dare. She did not parade. She opened a map. Don't make an empire on paper, Joe said, amused and tender. On the floor, Eliza said. Always. They built the authority like a repair, not a palace. Nem seconded 2 apprentices, not because they were loyal, but because they were careless in the right direction and would become excellent if given the truth early. Yari set up a calibration alcove with a glass wall and a chalkboard for error ranges like a civic shrine where numbers could be admired without being worshipped. Seal drafted a 2-line right for corridor openings. No candles, just a breath and a promise to leave rooms better than they were found. Torin drilled intake crews in the new hands here routine until the movement lived in muscle more faithfully than any memo. Eliza wrote the first C1 log in a hand that had learned humility. Nominal energy redirected to green Mez 6. Tolerance, documented. Deterioration, none. Benefit, communal. Audit window, open. She pushed her cart and discovered how much lighter weight becomes when the building consents to carry it with you. The braid on Vash's wall adjusted as if reluctant to admit it had been revised by something as indecorous as reality. At first, the change was a shimmer in the gray threads, an annotation that only the careful could see. Then the colorists in the census office invented a new shade without being asked, a muted, working gold that sat between gray and green, tied by thin cords to azure and violet. They labeled it C1 divided by repair and pretended they had always intended to. Vash stood in her perfect office, which had finally acquired evidence of assembly. A hairline at the corner of the desk where the oath matrix had been integrated, visible only at an angle you would not have chosen before you learned to love function more than faces. A tiny annotation pulsed on the ribbon. B117 divided by B117, B sunset. C1 doctrine, variance within bounds. Complaint, anonymous tone, bitter. The Empire, which had sung in silver for a very long time, learned one new harmony line. Syncopated, not offbeat. Human, not heroic. Kirel's descent hung in the records like a thorn in a paw, useful to remember, painful to forget. He took a post in records integrity, which sounded like exile until you realized the work would sharpen him for the day he would become necessary again. Vash sent him a copy of the first quarterly C1 metrics without a note, which is a note. Atrix signed one more order that no one would memorialize. Crimson Safety Engineers seconded to C1 threshold committees. It looked like surrender. It was strategy. Warriors learn early to stand where the bridge is being built or risk crossing it later under fire. On a late shift that tasted like coffee and carbon, Eliza took a walk she had never taken before. Up, past the mezzanines, through a door that opened because it now knew her name, onto a narrow balcony where the Capital Spire looked like what it was, a promise being repaired faster than it was being broken. Nem joined her with 2 cups. Yari arrived with a chalk-dusted sleeve. Seal leaned his shoulder against the frame, not to hold it up, but to be near something that was learning to stand without trembling. Torin came last and forgot to look guilty about being seen with them. Director, Nem said, passing over a cup with the gravity of a promotion that had refused glamour. Proctora will hate the word, Eliza said, sipping. It implies center. Then be a corridor, Yari said. Make it so people can't tell where you end. Seal breathed once, satisfied. We rode a rite without candles, he said, pleased with the feat. Warriors survived a day without a new statue, Torin added, and let himself grin. Stocks are quieter. Below, carts moved, doors learned. A child somewhere in the dormitories slept 1 degree warmer. An apprentice in green tightened a bolt and heard, for the first time, the small song a tool sings when it forgives you for using it wrong yesterday. A clerk in the census office invented a color without being asked. In the perfect room above, Proctora Vash watched the ribbon braid repair into law. She rested her hands on the desk the way she had on the first day, but the gesture had changed. It was still calculation. It was also participation. On the far edge of the wall, where future enters like weather, a small projection too shy to be prophecy blinked. C2, Fault Tolerance in Communications, an Azure proposal inspired by Yari's chalkboard. Vash felt the now familiar weight, the oath's reminder that consent is not a blanket but a cooling system. She spoke to the room that had learned to forgive one hairline crack. Proceed, she said. The Empire obeyed, not because it had been frightened, but because it had been taught to love a better verb. The machine had decided to dance quietly, within doctrine, to a rhythm it had finally admitted into its metrics. And in the seam between perfection and people, a gray hand wrote the line that would outlive all their names. Function is the law. Form is the costume it wears to remember the party. Eliza pushed her cart. Vash watched the braid. The color of repair settled in, modest and permanent, and the spire, having learned to breathe on purpose, did not apologize for it.